Welcome back to Sanctuary Sound Studio. This is Drum Talk with Earl Bennett. Today's talk features vintage Sabian cymbals with a closer look at the dark side.
Welcome to Drum Talk with Earl Bennett. And today we're going to talk about Sabian cymbals, specifically my Sabian cymbal collection. I told you we'd get to this. My introduction to Sabian cymbals came in the 1980s when everybody's did. The Sabian cymbal company looked like they were going to be making cymbals in the Zildjian tradition, and we found out that, of course, one of the Zildjian brothers, Robert Zildjian, actually broke off from his brother Armand and created Sabian, and he named it after his kids, Sally, Billy, and Andy. That's where the Sabian comes from, the first two letters of their name. When they came out, they were making cymbals in the A Zildjian factory in Canada. And so the early Sabian cymbals came out as A's, very much like the A Zildjians, but they also had that Canadian K quality. And I had a friend, Scott Hayes, who had a Canadian K, 20-inch Canadian K, which I played once. And another friend, Billy McCabe, who bought a 18-inch, I think, Canadian K Crash. So I saw a few of these Canadian Ks, and I played them a few times in Sam Ash, and I thought those are really cool cymbals. Well, it wasn't until after I went to Nashville and did that record that we talked about in my last video that I came in contact with Sabian. And I went to New York City on my 28th birthday. Most of my cymbal purchases back when I was in my 20s came around my birthday, and my brother Nick made a point of buying me a great present, and he bought me 3 Sabian cymbals, and that's a story in itself, but I won't get into that one. And this is the first of the 3. This is a Sabian medium heavy HH Ride, and it's a 19-inch, and it has that dark K quality to it. The other thing was it was small, and every video I ever saw of Steve Gadd playing, he always had small cymbals. It always looked like he had 18s. Anyhow, this was a 19. I kind of dug it. I thought it had kind of a Gadd kind of quality to it. So I got this, but I was really conflicted that day because I also played a really beautiful crash cymbal. This is a 17-inch thin HH Crash. And again, these are made in the K style. Just a beautiful dark crash, and to this day these two cymbals have not left me since 1988. Now there was another brother of this cymbal, and I will show you what that brother looks like because I had to buy it again in 2010. I have a good friend of mine who happened to be a Sabian endorser during the 90s. His name is Pat O'Donnell, and Pat has the brother cymbal to these 3 cymbals, and this is the later version of it. These are all 1980s, mid-1980s HH cymbals, and they're made very much in the likeness of the Canadian Ks of the 70s. So this is like an early 90s version of the same cymbal that I bought that day. Actually, my brother bought. It was a HH sound-controlled Crash Ride. Okay, and sound control had this little flat edge and this little cute little bell, and it was hand-hammered. It was HH. And it sounds kind of close to it. And I remember hitting this cymbal, or the one that Pat has now, and that's a story. I'll tell you that in a few minutes. But I remember hitting that 18-inch Crash and this 17, and I hit them together. I know you can't see it anymore. It's out of frame, but when I hit it, I thought of Toto. I thought this is kind of like the Jeff Picard thing. I know Jeff was a Paiste endorser and played Paistes, but it kind of had that big, washy Toto thing. So I really love these 3 cymbals. I was conflicted, and my brother bought me all 3 that day. So these are my original Sabian cymbals. Okay? The next Sabian cymbal I would pick up would be an 8-inch Splash. Because back in the 80s, everybody wanted splash cymbals, so I had a beautiful 8-inch Zildjian Splash that my wife bought me on a Christmas, one of the Christmases, and I was playing that to death. And then all of a sudden I said, you know, I really want a Sabian one to go with the Sabian set. My intention of having the Sabians at that point was I was hoping Sabian would see me and maybe I'd get an endorsement. That didn't happen. But I bought the AA Splash, and then my next buy was going to be a set of Sabian hats. And up until that point in time, I was using my Rude hi-hats for everything. So my Rudes were part of my collection. It was the Rudes and these Sabians, which sounded pretty cool together. But in 1990, I bought a set of 13-inch Sabian Regular AA hats. Now you can't see the AA on this anymore. I wore that off. I have a tendency to wear off hi-hat labeling. But I actually got the bottom, and these are about 976 grams, and this is 726 grams. Anyhow, long and the short of it, beautiful set of hats, and I play these still to this day. It's a wonderful set of hats. And this was my original Sabian setup. And that'd be pretty much my Sabian setup for a long time. Of course, having a friend like Pat, there were a couple opportunities for us to actually trade some things. And one day, Pat heard my 18-inch Crash Ride, and he really dug it. And he had a Noble Cooley snare drum, and I think we made some crazy trade for a Noble Cooley and some electronic gear I had. And long and short of it, he's got my 18-inch HH mid-80s Crash Ride sound control. And to this day, he taunts me that he's going to give it back to me one of these days. So Pat, one of these days, will come back. Other than that, I haven't had any other really Sabian ride cymbals until 2012 when I was in Minnesota. And while I was in Minnesota, one of the things I always did is I went to Ellis Drum Shop. And Ellis Drum Shop was a wonderful little homey drum shop, and the owner of the store was a wonderful guy. And anyhow, I haven't been to Minnesota since 2012. We stopped working in Minnesota. But I bought this Sabian HH early 80s medium ride. And I know it's early 80s because of the small logo, small HH logo here. And it also has that Canadian K writing on it. Now that was one of the unique things about Sabian HHs from the 80s, is they had that Canadian K writing on it. You found it on my Thin Crash had it. The Sabian 18-inch sound-controlled Crash Ride had that same writing on it, and so did my HH 19-inch medium heavy. It had that same very light but stamp from the Canadian K factory, and it's the same one. So this was very early 80s. Anyhow, I found this ride cymbal and I really love it. Kind of fits all the other HHs I have. Anyhow, this became my go-to ride until I bought the Kerope in 2014. And the day I bought the 22-inch Kerope ride cymbal in 2014, I was with my wife in Maxwell Drum Shop. I actually was looking for an artisan 22-inch ride, an artisan Sabian artisan ride. I actually went through about 30 cymbals that day and ended up buying the Kerope. And that was the day the Sabian cymbals died for me. I couldn't find a 22 I really liked. Now I will tell you that there are some really nice new Sabians coming out. The Vanguards look really cool. The Crescent cymbals that are made by Sabian, the Jeff Hamilton cymbals and Stanton Moore cymbals. And I have played a few artisans I really like. So maybe one day I'll go back and find that. But this was my last Sabian purchase. Now, if you remember from my last video, I said there's never been a Sabian China cymbal I liked. And I had one of Pat O'Donnell's China cymbals. And I had an 18-inch Chinese cymbal, it was called. There's a picture of me on a green Vistalite kit from the 1990s that I have that cymbal on. But I gave that back to Pat. I did find a China cymbal, and I'm going to show it to you, that I like, that isn't a Sabian, but it's a Tosco by Sabian. This was a Tosco by Sabian, 18-inch China. I call it thin China. Now Toscos were seconds. They were not considered good enough for production apparently. And they are B20 cymbals. There's not a lot of them. You will find them every once in a while on eBay. But I bought this at Guitar Center for $51. This ended up replacing my Paiste signature thin 16-inch china when it just kind of got to the point it wasn't playable anymore really. And it just is it's a pretty china. It's not a nasty china, it's a pretty china. It has a really nice sound when you turn it upside down, so I'm going to play it for you real quick so you can hear it. And anyhow, of all the china cymbals that Sabian makes, I really haven't found any I really like, except for this cymbal by Tosco, and I played one 19-inch Paragon. And I think I figured out what the china cymbal problem is for me, and I'm going to show it to you. A lot of the Zildjian Sabian Chinese cymbals have a very short lip. It's actually much shorter than this. This has got a nice big long 2-inch about lip that comes down the Chinese part. And I think that's the thing that the Paragon 19 has too. So maybe one day I'll get a 19-inch Paragon. But for the time being, the amount of chinas I play these days, I don't play a lot. Most of the music I've been playing in church, china is like no use for it. This kind of sits in my cymbal collection, doesn't get played very much anymore. But if I needed a china cymbal, this is the one I would go to today. And it looks like a Zildjian, it looks like a Sabian, nobody really knows the difference, has no logos on it. And it's about 1,072 grams of very thin 18-inch china with the big, wide Chinese lip on it, I'll call it. Anyhow, the last of my Sabian cymbals. Anyhow, I hope you enjoyed this video. I try to make it something you can learn from. I also try to just share what made me buy these cymbals. So I found Sabians to be great cymbals, and I still play them today occasionally. But I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, please leave a comment. If you didn't, don't leave a comment. No, you can leave a comment too. I always like questions and comments and suggestions for other videos. That'd be great. And I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Drum Talk and sure would appreciate some feedback. So until next time, keep on playing, keep on loving, and keep on keeping it real.